Hello, hello, and welcome. Come on in. Welcome to Modern Mentoring. I know we're going to have a number of people join today, so glad to have you. Come on in. Welcome, welcome. Hello, hello. Hi, Christopher. Hi, Adelia. Oh, I hope I didn't butcher your name. Hi, John Paul. How are you? I see Christopher. Uh, Adelaide, welcome, welcome. So glad to have you. Let's give it a few minutes and allow more people to join. I'm so excited to have you join us today. I hope you all had a great day. Where is everybody today? What city are you in? Christopher, where are you today? Are you in Dallas? Adelaide, where are you? I know John Paul, are you in Seattle? Why don't you type in where you are? Hi, Pooja. So glad you could join. Welcome. Welcome. Tonight's going to be a good one. We got a dear friend of mine joining, and I cannot wait to have the conversation with her today. Oh, Ghana, Accra, Ghana. So glad to have you. Oh, hi, Lori. Love these sessions. Oh, we're so glad to have you. Thanks for joining. Hi, Debbie. Welcome. Pooja, you're in Seattle, New Zealand. Oh, so glad to have you all. Welcome, welcome. I'm going to give it another minute and allow a few more people to join before I kick things off. Hi, Antonio in Detroit. Hello. Plainfield, Illinois, right around the corner from me. I'm here in Naperville today. So glad to have all of you. So we'll give it another minute. I know people are just trying to transition from one thing to the next. Hi, Vesna. Welcome, welcome. Chicago in the house, Port of Spain. So glad to have you. Awesome. All right, so I don't want to take up too much time, but I know a lot of people are going to be watching also because we record all these sessions, and I want to make sure that I do a proper welcome to everyone and welcome to Modern Mentoring. I'm your host, Lonnie Phillips. This was a platform that was created just simply to scale our mentoring efforts and to make sure that everyone had access to mentorship, be able to have these real, authentic, intimate conversations. And we are just trying to find a way to get the word out to all. So I cannot tell you how incredibly blessed I've been by hosting these and being a part of these conversations with you. And to get the emails, and you guys have, some have left me videos and just have written me notes to talk about what it has meant to you. I just want you to know that means everything to me, because I literally did not want anything in return but to just give back and to find a way to share all the things that I've learned and share my incredible network of wonderful people in my life, to share it with you. And hopefully you can take something from those conversations. You can see a little part of yourself in everyone that I bring to you, and you can take those learnings back. So I just want you to know it means everything that you participate in these sessions. But today we're going to talk about what does it mean to advocate for yourself. And I need you all to know your worth. And we have a dear friend of mine that I want to make sure that I do her justice, Bhavana Bartholf. She does work for Microsoft. She's the global head of sales strategy and business development for Microsoft Solutions. And Bhavana has served as in many leadership roles over the past 20 years. She's been at Microsoft 20 years. And most recently, she was our Chief Transformation Officer. And she's held many technical leadership roles, as well as she's led our customer success and professional services group. Now, I love to brag on my friends, and I have to brag on this one because she was also recognized by the National Diversity Council as one of the top 100 women in technology in 2021, whoop, whoop, and has been named one of 2021's Howard 50 Diversity Champions. So I want you all to join me in welcoming my friend Bhavana Bartholf. Bhavana, welcome to Modern Mentoring.
Thank you, Lonnie. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. You know, I love you.
I love you too. And I think it's important that our audience know that you and I do have a long relationship, and we've shared a lot of good times, and we've been there to support each other. And you and I talked about this topic, right?
Yep.
This is one of those topics that's taken me the longest to learn. And okay, let's just be honest.
Yep.
I'm still learning.
Yep.
I still make the mistakes. What about you?
So yeah, it's funny. You said I've been here 20 years, and I was like, oh my God, I'm old. But the biggest thing is just even recently, right? Like when we were talking about advocating for yourself, when I hit 20 years at Microsoft, which was like last fall, I remember calling you and just saying like, it took me a second to kind of look up and see like, all right, I've had a great, run at Microsoft. It's been great. But then am I doing what I have been wanting to do, right? I've had, aspirations. I've, obviously everyone has a goal that they're trying to work towards. And I just suddenly realized like I seem to have lost sight of it. And I was struggling with where do I start? And I remember picking up the phone and calling you and saying, hey, I'd like some help. Like, what should I do in this scenario? And I remember us having this conversation about let's go back to our own identity, our brand, figure out for ourselves who we are, and then let's, get back on track on the journey that we were on. And I appreciate the help that you gave. And I know we've had many, many conversations.
We have, and I'm grateful that you knew you could call me and have that conversation. And I know I could have that same conversation with you. And I remember that conversation vividly because remember I was headed to a doctor's appointment.
Right.
And when you called me, I said, no, this is too important. Let me just find somewhere to sit down and I'll talk to you. And I stopped and we had the conversation. And I am just so thrilled to see what you've done since then. So let's talk to everyone about this, advocating for yourself. But before we go in and share your great tips, because you do have a few that I think is important to share, let's put some context around it. So how should they think about what does it mean to advocate for yourself?
So I'd say the most fundamental way I'd represent it is you're the only person that can truly represent you. And when I say represent you, it's about your thoughts, your aspirations, your needs. And I think most importantly, being really explicit and clear on what's important to you is okay, right? Mm-hmm. And if you don't do that for yourself, it's going to be really tough for someone else. And I know you and I talked about it a little bit, right? Like no one's a mind reader. No one's been in your shoes. And no one knows what your struggles are either. And so unless you're explicit and clear on what you need, it's very tough for someone else to do it. So for me, advocating for yourself is representing yourself across what you want, what you need, and more importantly, how that feels for you and your thoughts and your journey as well. And so being able to represent all of it together, I think is important.
That's wonderful context. And I want to just tell our audience, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will continue to monitor them throughout this conversation as we're going through the tips. So welcome everyone who was able to just join us. So Bhavana, what would be the first tip you'd share with this audience?
Yeah, so the first one I would say, and I'm just a little bit of context for folks before I just jump into the tip. So I grew up in India, and I grew up with my grandparents. My parents lived in different countries, so I spent a lot of time with my grandfather. Self-made man, growing up in a country like India, where obviously everyone has an opportunity, but there's certain gender-specific expectations. And I remember him constantly, you always, as a child, you believe you can do anything, so that's great. But the thing that he fundamentally wanted us to remember is you have to believe in yourself. You can't expect someone else to do that for you. And believing in yourself, I will be honest with you, is it's easy when you can keep it for yourself, but when you have to believe in yourself and represent it, sometimes is a little tough to do in certain situations, certain scenarios, especially when you don't know the outcome of what that could lead to. And so at the end of the day, you've got to just start with you.
Yes. And I could not agree with you more on that one. Believing in yourself is tough, though, because if you've had a series of accomplishments, it's probably easy.
Yep.
But you and I both know that life sometimes throws you some blows and you have some disappointments along the way.
Right.
And so sometimes it's tough when you are coming off of a disappointment or where you weren't able to accomplish a goal to believe in yourself. So how would you encourage them to get through that difficult time?
So the biggest thing I would say, what works for me personally, is I work with this philosophy of take it in small bites, right? So it's more about putting that first foot forward. You don't have to solve everything. You don't have to deal with whatever you're dealing with, because we have a lot of things that happen in life, and life happens, whether that's on the personal side or something that you were working towards didn't happen. And you deal with disappointment, frustration. And in a time like that, it's tough to suddenly be big and bold and just to kind of get back out there, right? And so I always say, for me, the focus has always been, well, let's start with what can we do immediately? And some of it could just be call a friend, like I did with you, right? Like we all surround ourselves, and you'll be surprised on how many actual true allies and friends you have, and people that you can be real with and authentic and be honest with on what's going on. And I just say, like with many of those conversations, it's surprising how much you learn that you're not alone.
You are not. That is so true. So many people feel like they are. And to add to what you've said, the other thing that I'm learning is when you do have a disappointment, or when someone has a disappointment, to really first and foremost ask them, what was this moment here to teach me? Because I feel like everything we've gone through is here to teach us something. What was the learning we're going to take from this? The next thing I would offer in that area is to sit back, pull out a sheet of paper or pull out your computer, and start just thinking about all of the accomplishments you have had, and just start typing them out. Right? And keeping track of those accomplishments. And I've learned to keep them in a folder, because even on a bad day, sometimes we forget who we are. And it's just helpful to go back and reflect over, oh, wow, I guess I have done a lot. Right? Sometimes we just need those little reminders. So I hope that helps someone out there.
It does. And I actually love what you just said, Lani, which is, and maybe I should make a note of that too, just making a note for your own self on the things that you've actually accomplished and what you're super proud of. And sometimes what you're proud of may not seem big to somebody else, but the struggles and challenges you had to get there. So I actually love that one. And I think that's something that I think we should all remember as we go through this process.
Absolutely. Pooja has a question out here. Oh, did we not talk about this, Bhavana? Thank you for this comment, Pooja. Any tips on how to not cross the line from advocating for yourself to bragging? Can I say this? Because someone said this to me once and I just fell out laughing. It's not bragging if it's the truth.
That's right. I was just about to say something.
No, but go ahead, Bhavana. What was your feedback?
Right? I just was like, it's facts, right? At the end and I will say, like, so there's I think a lot of women get concerned on truly representing yourself because you're worried on, am I bragging? Are people going to think that I'm full of myself? And I will say, like, coming from just the way I grew up, you kind of, this whole balance of you want to stay humble and you want to stay true, but you've actually done some great things. And so how do you juggle it? And so I have learned to stick with facts, like you just said, right? Like if it's the truth and I can put it down on paper and it's a true representation of what I did, then that's okay. And then I've also gotten comfortable on, as you go through the process of, interviewing or representing yourself, whether it's getting that next level or promotion or job, I have a couple of stories that truly represent those highlights in my career and my personality. And I just stick with the ones I can speak to where the facts will talk for itself. So I think that's a huge piece of, at least the way I kind of try to work through it. But like I said, Lonnie, what you said was kind of spot on.
But you know what? You hit on a point, though, that I think is worth underscoring. And that is some of us, me included, grew up where when you talked about your accomplishments,
Right.
it was viewed as bragging, and bragging was not a good thing.
Right.
And so one of the things that I had to learn is that I had to learn to purge some of my learnings that it just happened in my upbringing that didn't serve me at this stage in my life.
Right.
Now, there's still a level of humility that I always have and try to practice. But when it comes to advocating for myself, I have to be willing to stand tall and speak to my accomplishments. And that is not bragging when you stick to the facts.
That's correct.
That is just the truth. And so I've just had to do that work. And that's the lonely work that you get to do, to really deal with some of that upbringing. And some of it for others is dealing with their faith and Christianity and all of that. It's all, wrapped into all of that guilt associated with being able to talk about your accomplishments. So Pooja, I really hope that helped you. So Bhavana, so what would be tip number 2 you'd share with everyone?
Tip number 2 is going to be, you always have a choice. And the reason I bring that up is in a lot of situations and scenarios like we just talked about, there are times when you feel like you're in a corner, you feel like you're stuck. And I'd say, especially when it comes to work, if you're in a job that you don't really enjoy and you're not waking up every day, excited about the work you're doing, or you're feeling like someone's constantly looking over your shoulder, or you're in a very toxic environment. It could be anything you want to kind of categorize it as. When we struggle the most when we do not believe we have a choice. And when we're in that place of feeling that way, it's because it's that fear of the unknown. I don't know what's going to happen if I go up today and just tell my boss I quit. I'm the sole provider for my family, so I can't afford to do it. And what I've learned over time is, well, you really do still have a choice. And the choice may not be what you're ready for. And sometimes all it takes is, being prepared, working through, so what could you potentially do? Let's walk through that worst case scenario, right? Which is, I may not find the job I want in the next 2 months, 3 months, 1 year. Let's play it out, right? And I've learned you play out that scenario, and some of it is obviously my husband's a psychologist, so helps me a little bit in that context of work through your fears. Let's talk through this thing. But I will say that whole piece of to feel like you have a choice, you've got to be curious. You've got to know, you've got to do your homework, which means educate yourself, look, and this is where I was play into what those scenarios are, the pieces that you don't know, and you'll be surprised on how enlightening and how refreshing that is to know that I'm not stuck here.
No, you're not stuck. But I really want to come back to something you said, because someone out there is frustrated and they may go quit their job. And we don't want you to do that. I don't care how mad you get.
Yep.
Don't walk out. Don't walk out on your job. Don't do that. I always have told myself, when I get frustrated, I really don't want to make those big decisions in frustration or anger, right? We clearly have a choice. The other thing I've shared with this mentoring group is that I do believe that every couple of years, you need to go test your value on the market.
That's correct.
And that is a healthy exercise. One, to validate the skills and experiences you have and what your worth is on the market, and just to see what's happening out there, which also helps you to develop new relationships and possibly hear about new opportunities. So when you decide the time is now, you'll already have those connections, and hopefully you'll get the tap on the shoulder. And then you'll say, you know what, here's the opportunity that's right for me at the right time. And that way you're not running away from something, you're running to something. So I just think that's so powerful what you said. So what about number 3?
So number 3 is your story is worth telling. I think a lot of times, and your I think Lani brought this up earlier, right? Which is your journey is your experience, and it's super important to recognize that, because a lot of times we spend our life comparing ourselves to others, like, why did that happen to me? Why didn't I get that opportunity? Or I have some of the this situation happened to me at work, but it didn't happen to somebody else. Like, why do I have to go through it? And what I've learned over time is that a couple of things. One, my story is actually a great story to tell, regardless of whether it doesn't seem like somebody else's and doesn't seem as powerful as someone that's gone through a lot of trials and tribulations and have accomplished what I would people would categorize as amazing achievements. But it's still a good story because it's who I am. And who I am, as we talked about, believing in yourself, is important, and it's worth it. And when you're advocating for yourself, people need to get to know you. It's not about what you think they want to hear. They just need to get to know you. And I think the most powerful thing is when you can be your most authentic and true self, and that people still see the value in everything that you can do. It's powerful, and it makes such a big difference in your own confidence, your own ability to continue to advocate for yourself with I'd say with that full force of what you want to bring behind it. And so that would be at least the place that I would start, which is it's super important that your story is worth it. And I will also say, sometimes out of actually the toughest situations that I've been in, I've actually come out better. I feel like I've done more when I've not been comfortable and I feel content. That one time, those, not one, I've had many of these, but those points of time in your career and in your journey when, things have not gone your way, when you've been tested, and it doesn't seem that great at that point, I'll just be honest, like, I've had my best growth and learning through that experience. And I at the end of the day, I don't think I would change anything through that process.
I'm with you, and I would say the same thing. And I love your tip about it's your journey and it's worth telling. Let me say this. I have found, and I've been in leadership a long time, that the people who are willing to share their story and share their journey, they get me emotionally invested in them because they cared enough to allow me to get to know them at a deeper level, and they bring a level of authenticity that allows me to truly see them, which makes it easier for me as a leader to be able to advocate for them more, or to demonstrate more empathy for what they might be going through. So I want people to really hear Bhavana when she's sharing with you, hey, you should tell your story. Own it, stand in it. Be proud of your story. Allow people to, because you never know who you might help. And I think I've learned the more authentic, open, transparent I become, the thing that has surprised me the most is the fact that I'm not alone. And I have more people that say, oh my gosh, I was just there last week, or oh my goodness, I'm going through that very thing right now.
Right.
And we have more in common than we realize. So I think that's really powerful. All right, what's the next one, our 4th tip?
So the 4th one, this one, it started off, when I grew up, one of the, pieces of advice my grandfather gave me was, you live every day like it's your last. And I know people have different ways of saying it because that seems a little morbid, but you can take it as every day is a new beginning.
Yeah.
Either way works, right? but if you had just one day, right, what would you do? And my biggest thing is, it's really about being brave and being bold. It's easier said than done. Don't get me wrong. I'm fully aware of it. But if you have that mindset of you've got this, this is your shot. You know you're going to go all in. And I think if we try to put ourselves in that scenario, we'll be surprised on how well we do when it comes to being explicit, how well, explicit on what you want and what you need, and also dreaming big and going and achieving those things that because sometimes I have conversations with folks and they talk about something they're looking to accomplish and they tell me, that's my 15-year plan. And I'm always like, well, why not today? Like, there's nothing you told me that you can't accomplish today, right? And so I think it's going for it and reaching for the stars. And I think sometimes the higher we aim, you'll be surprised. And even if we don't make it, like, you'll still go further than you initially thought you do when you play it safe. And trust me, I know how difficult it is, because playing it safe sometimes is kind of what works in my wheelhouse, because I want to make sure everyone's fine and everyone's comfortable. And it's easier to take risk if you're alone, but trying to take that risk when you have so many different moving pieces is a tough thing to do. And, Bhavana, my name means imagination. And so my grandfather always pushed me. He was like, I named you. So he'd always remind me of those times when I'm questioning myself, when I'm trying to hold back he's like, just go for it. Like, if you can imagine it, if you can't see what you can't be. And I remember Michelle Obama making that quote. And I love that quote because that kind of really represents what I was trying to say, which is you've got to be able to go for what you really want to go for. And you'll be surprised. Like, even just trying gives you such a great sense of accomplishment and feeling, regardless of what happens. And it's
that is so true. That is true. But you know what I think about? There's a quote. I hope I don't butcher this quote. You just made me think about it. If you aim for the moon and you miss, you'll still be among the stars.
Yep.
You heard about that? But the thing that I was thinking about as you were sharing that tip, I remember you and I were talking about, you were doing your professional development plan. I was updating my professional development plan. Well, you'll be surprised. This is a real conversation that I had today with two people. So, as you know, we always kind of do the regular check-in on career development plan, and I had an opportunity to do it with two individuals today. And it was really interesting that when we were looking at the roles that they aspired to do, the roles they aspired to do was only what they thought was within their grasp based on what someone told them.
Right.
But when I challenged them to think bigger, they struggled. And it was interesting that through that conversation, I was able to unpack. They really wanted more,
right,
but through their experience, somehow they had been convinced that this was a big enough goal. And when I challenged them to take off those blinders and to widen their aperture and consider bigger, they immediately on the spot started changing the roles and said, wow, I don't know why I was blocking myself like that.
right.
And I challenged them to think bigger. And I think we all need people in our lives that can see us doing more. Now, I help contribute to that because I had worked with them. I had some experience. I can say, I see your strengths in a couple of areas. Here are some other roles that you could possibly consider. We even talked about the contributions they could make from the job they're in, people we could introduce them to broaden their network. So, I mean, it was a conversation that had many levels to it, but it made me think about what you just said. A lot of people aren't willing to be brave and be bold like that and to speak up for what they want. I still remember someone was very early in their career and I did a career conversation and they told me they wanted to be CEO of a company. Yep. Of a Fortune 50 company. And I was sitting there going, all right, then, I've been really dreaming small compared to them. But what I appreciated was the boldness.
Yes.
Right? Some of us have just stopped dreaming.
Right.
And being bold. So I think that's a powerful one that our guests need to pay attention to. All right. Do we have any more questions out there before she takes us through the last one? All right. And Bhavana, I thought of something while you were talking that I'll see if we can give them some practical examples on some things when we're done with the last two.
Sounds good. Well, the only thing that I would add, though, and this is for those of you that are looking to advocate for yourself and also are there to support and other folks, if you're managers or if you mentor people as well, is I think it's many years ago, Lonnie, and I think you were also in when we did our small and mid-sized market, kind of customer base, right? And this is many years ago, I was given an organization. I just came in as a leader, and I think there's I can't remember, like there's a significant number of people in the organization, and the change that they were asking us to land sounded great, but then we lost all of our sales people in the process. And, the first thing I did, and, it's kind of one of those pieces of you've got to really know who you have and take the time to understand people's stories, their journeys, and what's important to them. And so I did one-on-ones with every single person. Initially, people were like, what the hell is she trying to do? And what I realized was I took the time, and I told folks, you don't have to prepare. All I want to know is who you are. And I asked them questions like, tell me about where you grew up, the town you were in, tell me about your family if you're willing to share it. Like, talk to me about things that you did over your life. Like, I asked people how would their children describe them, and it's been it was a very interesting conversation. But through that process, what I learned about the people we had, the capabilities of all of these people that may not believe that they have the capability, and it was amazing to see. I think a 300 or so plus organization come together because they all believed they could do it, because they all had something to offer. And I will tell you, to this day, I never forget that, right? I do that with any organization now I've gone into. And as you know, I've changed a lot of businesses and I've moved a lot. The power of letting people tell their story. And in a lot of these scenarios, I'd say a good 70% were not ready because they didn't know it was a story that was worth telling. And then giving them the ability to be brave and bold was amazing to see how people could come together. So I highly encourage you all to ask and be curious as you mentor and support people. Because a lot of times people come to mentoring calls with me, kind of similar to what you did, Lani, where their focus is on, tell me your journey, give me your tips. And I always start with, but give me some time to help to understand you, right? And the more you lean in and you learn. I even remember somebody just most recently I talked to, she never talked about growing up because she thought how she grew up was weird. And I was very fascinated by her story. And I've heard her since then share that story more broadly in multiple sessions with other people, because she suddenly realized it was great. But till then, she just thought it was a weird thing to talk about.
Yeah. And, you're talking about it from a leadership capacity, or when you're mentoring someone, but you can even do that when you're getting to know a new friend or a new colleague.
Right.
To just stay curious about who they are.
Yeah.
I think that is so important. You actually have a question in here. And before I do that, I think someone corrected my quote. Thanks, John Paul. Reach for the stars. So if you fall, you land on the clouds. I made up one, y'all. So thanks, John Paul, for that.
Thank you, John Paul.
So John Paul asked a question, removing blinders. Often we're told to do our roles. How does that coincide with dreaming big? Well, I think you have to remember, when it comes to dreaming big, and I'll just give my point of view, and maybe you can go next, Bhavana, because the next question is directly for you. I think it's important that people ask us to do our roles. And I think it's important, one, it depends on how long you've been in the role. If you've been in the role less than a year, please try to learn the job, master the job, and build a set of accomplishments on the job and be able to deliver some impact. And then be able to have that professional development conversation about what's next. But how I think about dreaming big is as I'm working on my professional development plan or my life plan, and those of you who've been with me since the beginning, know that I talk about the importance of a professional development and life plan. I do think it's important that you really allow yourself to dream big so that you can think about the art of what is possible and try and shoot for that, because you'll be surprised at what you'll accomplish. It's kind of like people ask me, what's next for you? I don't even know anymore because I don't want to put those limitations on my life, on my career. I want to just remain open, continue to serve, and try to make a difference. So I hope that helped a little bit. Bhavna, someone wanted to know, what does being vulnerable mean to you? And it was Pueyen. I don't want to butcher his name. You know how to say that? But what does being vulnerable mean to you in your leadership?
Yeah, so I think, it's interesting. Lani and I just went.
Uh-oh. She'll be back. I see Cassandra. Is that a real quote? Until she comes back. It's a real quote. Oh, shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. Thank you. I could not remember. Thanks, Cassandra. Okay, so it's not just me. All right, Bhavna's back. Okay,
Sorry.
Bhavna.
The question on leadership, I was saying, like, Lani and I just went through Dare to Lead training with, which was hosted by Brene Brown. And it was the biggest piece in that one that we really learned or walk away with is vulnerability is not a sign of weakness. And it was great validation because I think the question specifically is, how do I see it? Mm-hmm. So my philosophy has always been around servant leadership and starting with true authenticity and being real. And for me, vulnerability is being able to be that leader that is comfortable talking about what I don't know. And there's a lot that I don't know. And I also start from a point of being curious and taking the time to understand. And over the years, I will say, like, people who have worked, as a part of my teams over the years have realized, like, I am who I am. I don't, I may not have all the answers, but what I can do is I trust the people significantly that I work with. And so from a leadership standpoint, I welcome feedback. I believe in people being able, like, when I do these one-on-ones with people as I join organizations, that the first thing I tell them is I'm looking for people that are going to call me out. I can roll out the best strategy that I thought I'd rolled out, but I'd rather have a person that will tell me that's crap, that's not going to work, versus the people that are going to try to make this work. And I think letting people know and showing how you actually show up in those scenarios or in those moments when you are challenged and they see you being okay and admitting your faults, because we're all human. And I think Lani brought this up earlier, right? Like, none of us are perfect. We all know that. And then the other big thing, just personally, this is just a personal philosophy, is to never forget where you come from. And my grandfather came from nothing, and he always reminded us of that. Like, things can get taken from you, positions. It's all about how you treat people, and that's what's going to get you further. And so, don't be arrogant, don't be a know-it-all. Always learn through your journey, be curious, and be respectful and kind.
The Brene training, since you brought it up, it was powerful, I think, for a lot of us. And on the subject of vulnerability, for me, what was really powerful is people have to earn the right to hear your full story. Vulnerability wasn't about me exposing every single private thing there is to know about me. Vulnerability is just providing a level of transparency about the emotion or an experience you've had, or allowing them to hear your honesty about an experience, or where you need support, or just putting it out there. It's not about revealing everything there is to know about you. That was powerful for me, Bhavana, because I think I did believe vulnerability meant weakness.
That's correct. Yeah.
And I also thought vulnerability meant, oh, I got to tell them every single thing about myself. I don't think I want to do that.
Right.
And she helped me understand that's not what it is. You still have to allow people to earn the right to really know personal parts of who you are and what you're about. So that was powerful for me. And I hope that helped you, because that one was a big one for me. I learned a lot with the Brene training. So, all right, you have a fifth tip.
All right. So this one, I think a lot of folks are going to hear it and be like, oh, that's easy to do. But I'll say, So it's being kind. Now, I just talked about it a second ago, which is being respectful and being kind, I think is important. But sometimes one of the toughest things for us to do is being kind to ourselves. We, I think I'm my biggest critique. I push myself more. I sometimes forget. And you said this really well when you talked about writing down kind of your achievements, is I don't celebrate the wins, whether they're small, it doesn't matter. But if I've gotten through something that I was struggling with, or I did something nice, like, I think it's important, if you want to advocate for yourself, you've got to learn how to show yourself some love. And I think the being kind is tough on a lot of angles as you work through it, right? If you're someone that's very aspirational and you have goals and you work through it and you have timelines, people that are much better planners than I am, sometimes it's tough when you don't, and you never know what's going to happen. And so I think it's learning to balance, what you need for yourself with giving yourself credit and celebrating those moments, I think is okay. The other thing I will say is, I think it was Brene who said, clear is kind. And so when we talk about the concept of asking for what you want, and a lot of times, I'd say the way I grew up at least, and even in today's world where I have been, when I am explicit and I am clear, people kind of tend to sometimes shame you. And they can come from different aspects of, maybe they wish they had done it for themselves, to people are surprised that a person like me, and when I say that is, they're like, well, you're the easygoing, happy person who's always smiling. So how can you be now being bold and asking for something? And you'll be surprised on how many times that's what I struggle with the most, is when that happens, I start questioning myself. I'm like, should I have asked? Am I being selfish? Those thoughts that go in your mind. And then I've realized over time, no, it's not. And I think you said it well, right, Lani, which is you're the person that's got to be in your corner. I know we've had that conversation before. And to do that, you've got to start from a place of kindness, and giving yourself that grace and space, I think, is very important. And and at the end of the day, as we're talking about this topic, it is so important to advocate for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
No one else can do it.
No one can do that. Be kind. You know what I've also learned, Bhavana? And I don't always practice this, but I am getting better, setting some boundaries.
That's right.
We got to set boundaries, because that's part of being kind to yourself, to say what you will tolerate and what you won't tolerate.
Agreed.
And let yourself say, you know what? I'm not going to work these crazy hours. I need to get me some sleep so I can function optimally.
Right.
Or, you know what? I need to take a day off because I'm starting to get frustrated quickly and irritated with everything that someone's throwing my way. I need some space to breathe. Or don't answer that daggum phone or return that text when you're angry or frustrated, and just say, you know what, I'm okay not responding because I need to be kind to myself right now. And I think we all have just got to learn that in part of advocating for ourselves is meaning, and being kind to ourselves means setting the right boundaries around you as well. So, Bhavana, those were 5 great tips. And as you were talking, I was thinking about, people may really appreciate some of the practical stuff that we've done.
Yeah.
And I know I didn't tell you this ahead of time, so you see where you go with this. So I'll start it off and you share.
Yep.
I was thinking of what are ways people can advocate for themselves. What are some practical ways they can do it? Because I'm really big on the how, as you know. So I'll share some things that I've seen as best practices, and some of it I've done, and others I've seen other people do well. One is during one-on-ones. If you can take control of the agenda, sometimes you can't with your leader. Make sure you carve out time during that one-on-one to talk about some of the things that you're working on and the impact and some of the accomplishments you've had. And if you're not able to talk about them, you send it to them as a follow-up in email. Is there something that comes to mind for you?
The one piece when mentoring calls, definitely as you're going, if you're trying to go represent yourself, because I completely aligned with what Lonnie's saying. The other thing I learned over time, I would say, was, if you're going into an interview or even an informational to learn about a job, but this person doesn't know you, you tend to go in and ask them a lot of questions on what are they expecting for the job. I've learned now, if you want to control the conversation, and it's important to be able to work the conversation in your favor, is I ask a person, regardless of what they're going to ask me, I always say, help me understand what you're looking to get out of this conversation. And a lot of times they will tell you like, well, I'm really looking for people leadership, or I'm really looking for someone with a growth mindset, or, because if you don't know what that person's thinking, it's very difficult. Where you can go represent yourself, but we only have a short window of time. Every call is finite. Like you have 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, at the most an hour. But to tell your story sometimes doesn't come that easy to kind of get there. And so I always seek to get guidance ahead of the call on what exactly are you looking for? And at the end of the day, then I will still answer the questions my way, but I know how to pivot on the critical pieces of information this person is looking for. And I will tell you the shift in those conversations where in some scenarios, the door would have been closed on me right up front when I would have started having a conversation because I didn't have context and clarity in what they were looking for, to I now control that conversation and I can actually respond to it, or I actually know I don't have what's needed and I can give everybody a little bit of space and make up for that time as well. But I think it's really important to know who your audience is and how you're going to have that conversation.
Ooh, that's a really good one, Bhavna. So another one I thought about was, whenever you're trying to figure out what your story is and kind of you're ready to have that conversation, let's say you want to go in and advocate for a promotion.
Yep.
And you're sitting here going, okay, how do I prove to my boss that I'm ready for that next thing? A lot of people get lost in just reporting all the different activities that they've had or completed over the last year or 2 years or 3 years, however long it's been. And what I've seen as a best practice is to, if you do start with a list of activities, to ask yourself, what did I accomplish? What was the impact I made? What was a process I've changed? What was just really focus on impact statements in terms of what you drove, or if you're able to even tie it to some type of return on investment, be able to tie it back to a number or something in terms of if it was a sales job, you may be able to point to your attainment. You may be able to point to specific goals that you were able to drive, or consumption goals, wins, whatever it might be. I have just learned that anytime you can talk about your accomplishments in the sense of impact and the return on investment, if you can tie it back to that number, I am here to tell you, it just makes your story stronger.
Right. And I love what you said, Lani, which is it's about those facts. And I think, and I always tell folks, like the facts can be represented in percentages. And then I also believe that sometimes, it's not as easy to put into words the power behind the work that you've done. And that's where you phone a friend. The one thing that I would also say from an advice perspective, because we used to do these career advisory boards at Microsoft that we used to run globally. And one of the biggest pieces that we were teaching folks is the art of storytelling. And what I always tell folks is like you just said, if you were writing out your narrative on the impact that you had and the work that you've been doing, a lot of times we know we've done a lot. So if you had to put that all together and it was, a laundry list of, all these things, or let's just say my analogy is with a movie. That whole write-up that you have is your movie. But what you really get the chance to do is just that movie preview or that trailer. And so if you had to take the highlights of that movie and you wanted someone to be curious, eager, and really make the decision that I'm going to pay to go watch that movie, that's what you've got to translate into how you represent your story, your impact, is if you don't hit the right things, no one's going to lean in further to want to listen. And so I always tell folks, like, it's that elevator pitch or that movie trailer. Like, you've got to be able to take your whole story and bubble it down into a 30-second pitch that you know is powerful. And I will tell you, just from pure experience, Lonnie and I have been going through this journey ourselves. It takes hours and hours and hours, Stevie. I'm not there yet. I just want to be really clear. I'm getting there. It's a work in progress. But it's been years of working through this. And the more you do, the more you're proud of. That I will tell you, it takes forever. And you've got to keep reinventing that movie trailer, because you'll be surprised on the world around us changes, the bar continues to raise. And so you keep resetting yourself. So it isn't like a one and done. It takes the effort. And if you don't put the effort in, it's going to be tough to keep up with how the tide is moving.
I want everyone to write that one down, because that one's powerful. And I love where you said distill it down to about 30 seconds, right? Because how many times have you, Bhavana, been in an interview when you just asked a general question for someone to give you a little bit of a glimpse into their background, and you find yourself like 20 minutes in? People have a hard time being able to tell their highlights or share their highlight reels within a reasonable amount of time. And you know what? To your point, I still struggle. You know, I'm just kind of like, I feel like I shortchanged my story. Because I'm like, you know what I mean? It's like, well, I only focused on these 3 things. I probably should have landed 5 things. And you know, you go, okay, how would I do that? And you're right. Phone a friend to say, hey, let me try this out on you. Give me some feedback so I can refine it and make it better. It is something that happens over time, but it is powerful, because when you go in to advocate for yourself, it is going to be so important you can tell your story, and no one can beat you telling your story. Right. So I think that is so powerful. Well, I recognize that we're coming up on the hour, and I want to pause and see if there are any more questions out there before I let Bhavana give us a closing thought. Any more questions? I think we covered a lot. You know, before you do your closing thoughts, should we take them through the 5 tips you shared?
Sure. Okay. So I think the 5 that we had, I think someone did a good job summarizing it somewhere below, but it was believe in yourself. It always has to start with you. You always have a choice. Your story is worth telling. Your experience is your journey. Be brave, be bold, and finally be kind to yourself.
That's right. It's so powerful. We actually got a question while you were sharing those tips. John Paul wanted to know, what steps do you take to know what your next level looks like?
So I'd say, John Paul, I know Lani kind of just touched on this based on a previous question, but maybe the pieces that I would add is you've got to aim higher. I think someone gave me this advice when I joined Microsoft out of college when I was 10, but it was, when I first started, you always look at things that you think are achievable in your mind. And that's why when Lani, you made that example of someone that was early in their career had a conversation with you and they said that I want to be the CEO. And I was like, love it. Like, and we all used to be there at one point or time, right, in our careers. And the thing that I have learned over time is I'm very, like Lani said, I don't aim towards a specific job because things change. And I will say in my career, I'd say 80% of the jobs I've taken haven't existed before. Even my current role didn't exist, before I came into it. So you don't know what you don't know. But the pieces that I have been intentional, and I just shared this with Lani like last week, was I've always looked at, or aspirationally, if I want to aim high, what do I actually want to work on? And I really boiled it down to 3 core things around organizational maturity, business maturity, and executive maturity. And I have literally been working on that for over 15 years. But everything kind of in that space of each of these 3 buckets, as I just said it, you can go into a job. And I think someone had asked that question on, even if it's my current job, I will look to see in that job, how am I going to refine and tweak and challenge myself to strengthen my skill set in one of those spaces. And every year I pick 1 thing or 2 things. And when I look at levels, because you specifically asked about level from a promotion perspective, I do not look at the next level. I had this conversation with Lani. I was like, as soon as you give me one, I'm talking 2, 3 levels higher. And that's what I work towards, because then what that does is by default, you're already working towards the next one and the one after that. but you've gotten very explicit in taking the time to understand the competencies, the skill sets, the capabilities, the scope of what people are looking for levels much higher than where you are. And that's why I said, if you aim just one above or, two above, sometimes you can limit your ability to really think big, because you're going to put the effort in anyway. And I always believe in that concept of it. I want to be like a pebble in water, which is I'm going to put the effort in, but that ripple effect better be large. And if I look that way all the time, you'll be surprised on how quickly you'll be able to, really set yourself up for success in your readiness and your ability for the next level. Now, there's other pieces that come into play, which is budget and business need, but at least you know where you stand.
Absolutely. I hope that helped you, John Paul. Brian, thank you so much for writing down those tips. So, Bhavana, do you have any closing thoughts?
I would say one, everyone needs to continue joining and attending Lani's Modern Mentoring.
Thank you.
I love Lani. So, and there's all of the excitement in the chat window. I will say, I think all of you too. So spread the word, and get more folks participating, because we're all here to support Lani as well. I would say, in closing, I'd say the biggest thing is it's got to start with you. And, like the title says, advocate for yourself, and you've got to remember you are worth it. It doesn't matter what anyone tells you. You just need to know that you're worth it. You've got Lani and I in your court, regardless of what happens, and you're never alone. We're all in it together, and everyone, where they are in their career, struggles at different points in time, and no one has their stuff together. Everyone, it's a journey, and it's a process. It takes time, and like I said, you're worth it. So make the investment.
Absolutely worth it. And remember what we also said, because it's something I know you believe in just like I do. And always remember to reach out and help someone else.
That's right.
Because isn't that what modern mentoring is all about? We've had all of this experience, and I just wanted to find a way to scale it and share it with others. So, Bhavana, I just want to pause for a moment and just celebrate you. I am so proud of you.
Thank you.
I'm just so proud of all of your accomplishments. And more importantly, I am so proud to have you as my friend and to be that person that I can call, whether I'm having a great day and I need someone to celebrate with, or I'm having a tough day and I need someone to help me think through a difficult problem. So I just want to say thank you for that. And more importantly, thank you for giving of yourself unselfishly to be a part of modern mentoring today. I think you had some powerful, powerful tips that are really practical that people can apply. And I'm sure that you've helped so many people today, and for those that'll be watching it later. So thank you so much for that.
No, thank you for having me, and right back at you at everything you just said.
So I'm looking at the time. I want to say thank you all so much for joining. I hope you were able to walk away. Bhavana shared some great tips. I hope you were able to walk away with at least one nugget that you can take and apply. We will be this session was recorded. It will be available shortly after we end our live session, and I will make it available on YouTube. Continue to give me the feedback in terms of topics that you want to hear. John Paul, I think this was your request. I hope we met the bar. He wanted to make sure he understood how to advocate for himself. I also want to stress to all of you, you matter. You're worth it. So please start advocating for yourself. It's a journey, but I know you can do it, and we're all going to start holding ourselves accountable, and we're going to start doing that more often. I hope you have a wonderful evening, day, wherever you are in the world. I look forward to joining you on the next Modern Mentoring session. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.